So, for anybody who's been in the U.S. gun debate and probably some gun debates in some other countries for any amount of time, it's almost a certainty you have heard some variation of the phrase, I'm a gun owner and I support common sense gun laws. U.S. gun laws are insanely lax. And you might have been somebody who actually used some variation of that phrase because you thought it was a good idea for an argument or something of that nature. You probably got some contempt put back at you, and maybe you don't understand why. Although I imagine there's a good deal of you that probably do understand why. But still, if you are one of these people who has used some variation of that phrase as a response to somebody who's actually a little bit more pro 2A than you are, well, there's a reason for that. And the reason for that is because the most charitable way that we can take this is that you are a really ignorant gun owner, and you are so ignorant on this debate that you just don't realize it. All right. There are several different ways I can go off with on this one. Let's start off with the ignorant gun owner portion of it. You bought what, one gun for home defense? Maybe, a pistol, maybe not even as nice as this one. You loaded it up, threw it in the drawer and that's it. Maybe you took it to the range one time to, test it out, but you never really cleaned it. You just put some hollow points in there, if that, and just tossed it in the drawer, and that that's your extent of your knowledge. Or maybe you didn't buy a pistol. You took the FUD advice of, well, buy a slide action shotgun, and just if a home intruder breaks in, just rack the slide, they'll go away. Yeah, it's FUD advice, and I don't really have much respect for this advice, obviously, because it's really bad advice. First off, you rack that slide. Yes, some home invaders are going to flee. Others, however, are not. So, what is your plan after that? Of course, the person who's giving this advice is probably repeating this from somebody else that they heard it from, and they're going to have something like birdshot and there too. Now, birdshot obviously is going to be the more cheaper ammunition. Uh, it could be buckshot. That's a common round, and that's obviously, when somebody's pressed for an answer on what is a good home defense round, they'll go with double aught buck. Just out of sheer fact, it's a common round, but most of the time, it's more likely going to be birdshot. And yes, that birdshot might get a home invader to rethink his life choice. It might even be a fatal wound. Then again, it might not. It might not dissuade that home invader. It might be a few home invaders. You may have dissuaded one or more of them. You might have not. So now, what is your plan after that? Don't really have time to reload your shotgun at that point. So you see where I'm going with this. And by the way, you got double aught buck. That's more likely to go through walls and injure or kill somebody on the other side than say a 5.56. The thing that you guys claim to be really scared of, and you don't know why. Um, And don't even get me started on Bud Stacks. But you see, the fact of the matter is that you have that limited experience. That's it. I mean, you are maybe one step above somebody who's never touched a firearm in their entire life, or maybe they touched a firearm once to go shoot at their cousin's house, and that's the extent of their experience. So, yes, I suppose that you could still have an opinion. With not a lot of information, the problem is it's just not a very good opinion. And this is the crux of the issue here. Is that what you're saying is a really bad opinion, and you just don't realize it. So, yes, that's as charitable as we can be with you on on ignorance. And you know what the problem is in the debate with this is that if there weren't guys like me, pushing back against all these stupid proposals, we would be in a very similar situation in the UK, except with a much higher homicide rate, obviously. You know, we've always had a much higher homicide rate than the UK, and a lot of people seem to be oblivious to the fact that UK has had that low homicide rate even before all of their gun control laws. There was a time when Brits were allowed to own select fire weapons just like Americans were. Those days are gone for the Brits. Been gone a long time, but even before then, their homicide rate was actually lower than it is today. But obviously, instead of saying, "Well, why do you need an AR-15 for home defense?" You have a shotgun. It would be, "Why do you need a knife? Why do you need to own a knife like this for home defense?" Which is, by the way, this knife is illegal to own in the UK. Period. You can't even, you know, forget carrying it. You're not allowed to even own it. So you would have these very same people then at this point making the argument, well, why do you need a knife for home defense? You have a perfectly good wiffle bat. You get the gist of what I'm saying. So, yes, this is where it comes into. And by the way, just to inform you, it's irrelevant to me or anybody else who's pro 2A whether or not you have a firearm, or not. The fact of the matter is that it offers us no benefit or condolence, if you want to put this way, um, that maybe our AR-15s got banned because you have a duck gun in your closet, or maybe a 38 revolver, or a revolver Chamberlain 38 special in your drawer. Yeah, no. Especially if you're the one advocating uh, for them to be banned and confiscated. You know. Now, furthermore, let's think about this a second, because there are a number of you gun owner butts that have come out and directly said guns are the problem in the U.S. and yet you own some of these problems. I mean, think about what you just said there for a second. Guns are the problem, and yet you own these very problems. What logical sense does that make? Somebody on my side of the aisle is going to have more respect for that outright gun banner that says guns are the problem and don't own any guns than they are for you at that point. So, are you starting to see how this was a really ignorant claim to make? And again, that's the charitable one. There are a lot of people who say I'm a gun owner too, and I support these laws, and they're not doing it out of ignorance. They know exactly what they're saying. They're doing it as a form of, hey, I'm just like you. Um, you should really just go ahead and, help these guys that want to ban your stuff get closer to their goal. And, just manipulation at that. And most of us on my side see through that. So, I mean, if you wanted to be treated with any form of respect or not to be held in contempt, you probably shouldn't do contemptible things like try to manipulate people. It's kind of funny because, a while back, got into it with a gun controller online. This person started off by saying no one wants to take your guns, and his stupid little friend, after I responded to him, by the way, his stupid, I said, well, this is not exactly true. Many high profile gun control supporters in the US have pointed to countries like the UK and Australia as shining examples, and they had gun confiscations. And of course, his stupid little friend chimed in and said, oh, well, there's a lot of evidence to suggest gun confiscation save lives. So, yeah, that because if the stupid little friend had not chimed in, there'd be no amount of evidence I could have shown this guy, aside from say, hey, look, your stupid little friend jumped in. Well, immediately, instead of saying, you know what, I was wrong, there are people that want to take your guns, this person instead went to the whole, well, I only speak for myself. Well, we know that's not true. When you say no one, you are implying, in fact, outright saying that you speak for more than just yourself. So, yes, this is a manipulation. Um, this is sheer manipulation. This is, well, let me tell you what I think you want to hear in order for you to support what I want to do. And of course, this person was surprised when I kept on moving their nose in it. I don't know why, but they. The fact of the matter is that should have been the thing. Oh, hey, maybe I shouldn't have done this. Maybe I am not the good person in this debate. Considering the fact I said something I was pretty sure was not true. But no. So yes, when somebody says I'm a gun owner too, this is the most likely reason behind it is a form of manipulation. So the sheer ignorance one, is a distant second. And of course, there are people who lie about being gun owners. And it's another form of manipulation. But furthermore, let's dive into this. Let's take any gun owner, but I support common sense gun safety laws, and let's compare how much they really know. Let's use some common sense here, as they like to throw around. Who is it that you think is going to be the person who say owns, AR-15s and they own, you know, even stuff that's real NFA items. And I realized that stock for the other rocket was sitting on a sling. Uh, do you think it's going to be the gun owner's butt? Do you think it's going to be the people who support reasonable gun laws that are going to be the ones that go out of their way to get NFA items? I mean, or build massive gun collections or anything of that nature? probably going to be more of these shall not be infringed types. I mean, now, granted, there are shall not be infringed types that own maybe one, two, three, four, five firearms, and that's all they think they need. And well, that's all they care to own, or maybe they'd like to own more, but just don't want to spend the money on more, and maybe they don't get out to the range as much as some more serious firearms enthusiasts. But generally speaking, when you talk to the upper tiers of people in this, you're going to find the shall not be infringed types tend to be more knowledgeable when it comes to firearms, firearm laws, and all that other stuff in general. You know, common sense does kind of dictate that, hey, if you're interested in a topic, you're probably going to take the time to learn more about that topic than, say, somebody who is uninterested. And don't get me wrong, there are a handful of, maybe gun owners, but who, might have a degree of knowledge in firearms and firearm laws and stuff like that that are maybe slightly above average. Those are the third type of gun owners, but by the way, and these people actually used to be the greatest number of gun owners, butts, at least in my opinion. I could be wrong, but you know, um, but back a while ago in the conversation, you had a number of these types of people who indeed were into their firearms. They didn't want to lose their firearms. And quite frankly, these people thought that if they didn't give in anything, that eventually the gun controllers were going to turn around and ban everything finally, and all in one foul swoop. And this is largely, I mean, before the days of the internet being so widespread. With the popularity of the internet, obviously, we get our information now from more than just, the TV and radio media. We're able to talk with each other online. And we're able to see that we're not alone. We're able to actually look at information that, maybe, you know, previous generations of media did not want us to see, and a lot of people have come to the realization that, well, not only is conceding to these people at small amounts of freedom not going to satiate them, it's only going to encourage them. And hey, the most recent example right now is Canada. And yes, Canadian gun owners, you know exactly what I'm talking about, and you agree with me on this one. Most likely, if you're a Canadian gun owner. Of course, people in the U.S. who haven't been paying attention to what's been going on in Canada, well, Canada for some time has had a number of firearms restrictions. I mean, they're not the worst in the world. They're not UK bad, but they definitely were not as permissive as, or as free as the vast majority of the U.S. is. Not by a long shot. I mean, again, harken back this pistol as an example. Even before, the recent spat of reforms they put in place, this pistol was still illegal. It's considered, I believe, a short barrel pistol under Canadian law. It's considered a prohibited class. Well, even with all the restrictions that Canada had in place, Justin Trudeau decided those weren't good enough. Well, he got the ban on AR-15s and several other firearms that were already in the restricted category that you had to get a special license for. And after he got that, he just wasn't satisfied. Now, more of the regular handguns, well, they got banned too. So after that, you would think, well, maybe this guy is satisfied now that he's got the handguns too. Well, no, they continued to go after more semi-automatic rifles, more semi-automatic shotguns. I don't have all the fine details, but that's the general. Uh, Shoot, that's generally what happened, I should say. So, um, as you can see, every time they get something, it doesn't satisfy them. In fact, they're like, okay, well, we got this. Now let's go even harder. Let's get even more. Because those recent reforms, I've said, they all happened within a very short period of time. It wasn't like how it was previously with Canada, and even the U.S. to a degree. I mean, it wasn't like we got the NFA, they got the AR-15 ban like in 1934, then the handgun ban in 1968 and stuff like that. No, it was a very short period of time. Whereas the U.S., I mean, we've unfortunately allowed infringements to go unchecked. Part of this was because people were entirely permissive of it. Other parts of it, like the very first one that happened under the FDR administration, it didn't really get the challenge in court it needed. I know people are going to cite Miller, but there's some problems with that. Namely, you didn't have somebody arguing against the U.S. government because he was already dead by the time it made to the U.S. Supreme Court. But you had that problem with the FDR administration. You also had the problem with the FDR administration stacking the courts because most of FDR's policies kept getting struck down before he finally stacked the Supreme Court to rule the way he would want them to rule, as opposed to actually reading the Constitution and saying, okay, look, what you're doing is unconstitutional. Or, okay, sure, I mean, right here you have the power under the Constitution to do it. They instead just, put judges on the Supreme Court that would rule in the favor of FDR. And unfortunately, that did not get challenged. And, unfortunately, our voters at the time were more concerned about social welfare programs, programs that many of which were unconstitutional as is, that they didn't really care what the Constitution said. And quite frankly, they bought into some of the tired old arguments now at this point that, well, hey, the NFA is just about going after the gangster guns. This doesn't affect self-respecting gun owner guns. This is about gangster guns. Only the criminals want the guns that are covered by the NFA. Well, so and then in 1968, that's when our second major gun control bill got pushed federally. Well, that created the class of prohibited persons, as well as a few other things. So again, the more you push back on them, the less encouraged they become. Then you move forward to 1993 in the U.S. And what happened there? They got the Brady Bill, and then a year after that, they got the scary-looking gun ban that thankfully got negotiated down to having a 10-year sunset period, because if not, that ban would probably still be in place because we know the Republicans might say, well, no, they shouldn't have done that, but they never actually get up off their asses to repeal any of this unconstitutional crap the Democrats put in place. And I think, quite frankly, there are a lot of Republicans that will say whatever they think they need to say to you to get voted, but they're really no different than the Democrat politicians themselves, who really agree with them, and they're more concerned about what the Democrat establishment in D.C. wants as opposed to what their actual voters want. We got a prime example here in Texas. His name is John Cornyn. And quite frankly, again, I don't know why that motherfucker hasn't been primaried yet. So back on topic. But you see where I'm going with this is that appeasing the crocodile and hoping he eats you last, that's not really the best way to go about it. And I think a lot of people who used to be gun owners but had that thought process. And they're finally starting to realize that appeasement actually has the opposite effect. There were, again, I know some people that were like that. And there was one point in my life I would have been happy just to, have some of the restrictions we had. And then I realized what a bad idea that was. So there you have that. Now, the fourth and final category of gun owners, but I want to bring up, and these, quite frankly, there probably is fair share of them. I also know one or two of those types too, personally. But these people are the biggest assholes, and they are the well. It's okay for me to have the types of guns I desire, or it's okay to have the types of guns I approve of for the reasons I approve of, and it's okay for me to have firearms, but not you. And I want this gun control in place to make sure that all the people I don't approve of having firearms don't have firearms. People that have guns I don't approve of, well, those guns need to be banned and confiscated. So you can see why people like me would treat somebody like that with absolute contempt. So I don't think I really need to explain that one all that much. You're dealing with basically people who are control freaks, and quite frankly, truth be known, they're very miserable people themselves, and they just don't like it when somebody else has a little bit more fun than they do. And I mean, from my personal observations with these types of people, is it these types of people generally? I mean, yeah, I mean, sure, I mean, love to have the money to buy a high end AR-15 like this, and they love to be able to go to the range and shoot the rounds that this shoots. But you know what? Either they refuse to save up their money for such a rifle. Maybe they've got other things they'd rather spend their money on. And since they can't have, say a rifle like that, nobody can. Or maybe they just, are happy with maybe their deer rifle or duck gun. And that's all they need, and they get uncomfortable with the fact that somebody might have a gun that they perceive to be better than theirs. In fact, actually, one such gun owner, but who is very much so a guns for me, but not for thee. All they own is one single 9mm pistol, and before we stopped talking completely, just because this person's a fucking asshole. I'm not getting into all that, but yeah, this person was asking me what a good AR-15 was, chambered in 308. I explained to him, well, what you're looking for is an AR-10, not an AR-15. But I gave my advice on that one. I think this person saw the prices of the AR-10s I was showing them and decided they didn't really want to spend that money on them, you know. But hey, I mean, if you're expecting to buy a good AR-10, you're still going to spend some money on one. So I've let this go on for a little bit. I'm hoping that for those of you all who are still here, by the way, I mean, this is probably one of my longer monologues, so to speak. But if you haven't already made use of the comment section, definitely feel free to do so. Let me know your thoughts on the issue yourself. Maybe there's something you disagree with what I said. Again, I'm willing to listen to opposing opinions, just not willing to uncritically accept them as the truth. But you already knew that about me. So, y'all take it easy out there and have a great day.